There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes not from working too hard, but from pushing in the wrong direction for too long. It is the exhaustion of someone who has tried everything, changed everything on the outside, and still finds themselves circling back to the same place they started. If that exhaustion is familiar to you, this audiobook was written for this exact moment in your life. Because what you have been doing has not been wrong. It has simply been aimed at the wrong level. The circumstances of your life are not the source of your experience. They are the output of it. And when you finally understand where the actual source is located, the entire strategy changes. You stop fighting the current and start redirecting it at its origin, which is something you have always had complete access to. Every chapter in this audiobook addresses a different dimension of that redirection. You will learn why the universe is not withholding anything from you and what is actually blocking the flow. You will understand the specific mechanism through which thought and emotion become physical reality. You will discover what to do when nothing external seems to be working, because the answer is always an inner move, not an outer one. The teachings here are ancient, confirmed by modern science, and immediately practical. If you are enjoying this audiobook and want to continue building real communication confidence, subscribe to this channel now. More chapters are coming, and each one will guide you step by step through mastering every conversation. Chapter 1. Why nothing has been working before anything can change. One specific truth has to be faced without flinching. The reason nothing has been working is not what you think it is. It is not bad timing. It is not a lack of opportunity, a lack of effort, or some cosmic unfairness in how life is distributed. The reason nothing has been working is that everything you have been doing to change your life has been happening at the level of symptom rather than at the level of cause. You have been rearranging the furniture in a house whose foundation is cracked. And no matter how beautifully the furniture is arranged, the crack in the foundation keeps producing problems that the furniture cannot solve. This is not a metaphor designed to make you feel defeated. It is a precise description of the specific mislocation of effort that produces the frustrating cycle of trying everything and changing nothing. The cause of your life's circumstances is not located in your circumstances. This statement sounds obvious when stated directly, yet the vast majority of people spend virtually all of their change-making energy at the level of circumstances, because that is what is visible. The difficult relationship is visible. The inadequate income is visible. The body that does not feel right. The career that does not fit. The pattern of outcomes that keeps repeating itself across different contexts and different years. These are all visible. And visible problems naturally attract visible attempts at solution. Change the partner, change the job, change the city, change the diet, change the strategy. Every one of these changes happens at the level of the symptom. Every one of them eventually reveals the crack in the foundation that was there before and will be there after, producing the same essential pattern in the new relationship, the new job, the new city. The actual cause is located in the mind, and more specifically, in the subconscious layer of the mind that most people have never deliberately examined. The subconscious mind processes roughly 11 million bits of information per second, compared to the 40 bits per second processed by the conscious mind. It stores every experience, every interpretation, every emotionally charged moment across an entire life, and from that stored material, it constructs and continuously reinforces the beliefs, expectations, and identity patterns from which every moment of lived experience is generated. These beliefs and patterns are not accessible through ordinary conscious introspection. They do not feel like beliefs. They feel like the way things simply are, which is precisely what makes them so difficult to recognize and so invisible to the change-making efforts aimed only at the visible symptoms they are producing. When a person applies genuine effort to changing their circumstances without touching the subconscious patterns generating those circumstances, something predictable happens. The effort produces temporary change. The temporary change feels like progress. And then, in a period ranging from weeks to months to years, depending on how deep the original pattern runs, the circumstances drift back toward the pattern that the subconscious has been maintaining as its default setting all along. The person who loses weight and regains it. The person who builds savings and then loses them through a sequence of decisions that seemed reasonable at the time. The person who leaves one unavailable partner and within a year finds themselves in an identical dynamic with someone whose name and face are entirely different. The pattern is not a character flaw. It is a subconscious program faithfully doing its job. What changes everything is the shift in where effort is directed. When a person begins directing genuine, consistent, skillfully applied effort at the subconscious programs, generating their circumstances, rather than at the circumstances themselves, the results are categorically different from anything produced by surface-level strategy. This is not because inner work is more virtuous than outer action. It is because inner work addresses the actual source of the problem rather than its expression, which means the changes produced at that level do not require constant maintenance, do not drift back to the old pattern when vigilance relaxes, and do not leave a person exhausted from the effort of sustaining change that the underlying system is continuously working to undo. Understanding why nothing has worked is not an invitation to self-blame. The subconscious programs generating your current circumstances were not chosen. They were installed through the accumulated weight of experience, particularly early experience, without your deliberate participation or conscious consent. The child does not choose the beliefs about their worth, their safety, and their place in the world that form during the developmental period, when the critical faculty of the conscious mind is not yet active. Those beliefs form through the environment, through the repeated messages of authority figures, through the emotional atmosphere of early relationships, and through the interpretations a young, impressionable mind draws from experiences it does not yet have the context to evaluate accurately. The adult living with the results of that early installation is not responsible for having received the programming. The opportunity now is to become genuinely responsible for examining it, understanding it, and deliberately revising it. The universe is not working against you. This is perhaps the most important single realization available at the outset of any genuine inner transformation, because the belief that external forces are responsible for persistent difficulty is itself one of the most consequential and most thoroughly self-reinforcing programs available in the repertoire of human limiting belief. The universe functions in its most honest, metaphysical, and scientific description. As a responsive system that reflects back the dominant patterns of the inner world with a faithfulness that can appear as either gift or punishment, depending on which direction those patterns are pointing. When nothing works, the universe is not obstructing. It is responding faithfully and without judgment to the specific signal being broadcast from the inner world. And the first step toward changing what the universe responds with is understanding precisely what signal it has been receiving. This audiobook begins at the only place any genuine transformation can genuinely begin, with the honest recognition that the source of what you want to change is located inside you rather than outside you, and that this recognition is not a burden, but the most practically empowering realization available in any life at any point in that life's unfolding. What is inside you can be examined, understood, and genuinely revised in ways that external circumstances simply cannot be, because external circumstances are downstream of the inner world rather than the other way around. Every chapter ahead addresses a specific dimension of that inner revision, approached with the honest, practical, non-magical understanding that genuine transformation requires genuine inner work, rather than the wishful thinking that would prefer a universe that simply delivers what is asked for without asking anything genuinely difficult in return. Chapter 2. The inner signal you have been sending the universe receives signals, not in the way a radio tower receives electromagnetic waves, though the electromagnetic dimension of what the human body broadcasts is more real and more measurable than most people realize. It receives signals in the broader sense that any responsive system receives and processes input through the specific patterns of thought, emotion, expectation, belief, and behavior that a person consistently generates from their inner world, and that then shape perception, behavior, and the quality of interpersonal broadcast in ways that produce corresponding patterns in the external world. The signal is not a mystical transmission sent to a cosmic receiving station somewhere in the universe. It is the total, continuous output of the subconscious operating system running beneath the surface of daily life, expressed through what a person habitually notices, what they habitually feel, how they habitually move through the world, and what they habitually attract as a result. Most people are entirely unaware of the specific signal they have been sending, because the signal does not feel like a transmission. It feels like ordinary daily experience. The anxiety that arises before most interactions with authority figures does not feel like a signal broadcasting inadequacy. It feels like a reasonable response to genuinely intimidating situations. The reflexive discounting of genuine compliments does not feel like a signal transmitting unworthiness. It feels like the appropriate humility of a person who does not want to seem arrogant. The chronic low-grade sense that things always seem to work out for other people, but rarely with equal ease for oneself, does not feel like a signal generating selective perception of difficulty. It feels like an honest assessment of observable reality. Each of these experiences is the signal, and the signal produces the experience, and the experience then confirms the signal, in a loop that can run indefinitely, without ever revealing itself as a loop from the inside. The emotional dimension of the signal is its most powerful component, which is why the teaching throughout this tradition consistently emphasizes emotion rather than thought as the primary creative force in the inner world's production of outer reality. Thoughts generate emotion, and emotion generates the physiological and electromagnetic conditions that constitute the actual broadcast. A thought held without genuine emotional resonance produces minimal, lasting effect in the subconscious or in the external world. The same thought held with genuine fear, genuine longing, genuine resentment, or genuine faith produces a dramatically different and considerably more powerful signal, because the emotional charge is the amplifier through which the thought reaches the systems that actually determine what gets attracted and what gets produced in the physical world of experience. Research at the HeartMath Institute has established that the human heart generates an electromagnetic field extending approximately 5 to 10 feet beyond the physical body in all directions. That this field carries specific patterned information corresponding to different emotional states, and that people in proximity to this field show measurable physiological responses to the emotional patterns it carries. This is not an esoteric claim. It is published, peer-reviewed research, produced by a legitimate scientific institution. The practical implication is that your emotional state is not a private internal experience. It is a broadcast, and everyone in your immediate environment is receiving it below the level of conscious awareness, adjusting their responses to you accordingly, in ways that neither they nor you are consciously managing. The signal shapes every interaction, every first impression, and every opportunity that emerges or fails to emerge from those interactions. Becoming aware of your actual signal requires the specific practice of honest self-observation, applied to emotional patterns rather than to thoughts or behaviors alone. The question worth sitting with for several days, with genuine, non-defensive curiosity, is, what is the dominant emotional tone of my ordinary daily experience? Not the emotional peaks of particularly good or particularly difficult days. The ambient emotional atmosphere of ordinary Tuesday afternoons and unremarkable Wednesday mornings. The background feeling state that is simply present during the hours of an ordinary day. For most people who genuinely engage this observation, the answer is more sobering than comfortable, revealing a dominant signal characterized by some combination of low-grade anxiety, mild but persistent dissatisfaction, chronic low-level vigilance, or the specific quality of waiting for things to improve, that is itself a signal transmitting present insufficiency. The signal you have been sending is not fixed. This is the absolutely essential counterpoint to everything described in this chapter so far, because without it, the entire description of the signal and its effects collapses into a counsel of despair rather than an empowering map of where genuine change is actually available. The signal is not fixed because the inner world generating the signal is not fixed. The beliefs, expectations, emotional patterns, and subconscious programs that constitute the inner world were formed through a process, and they can be revised through a process using the specific mechanisms this audiobook describes across the chapters ahead. The process is not instant. Patterns that have been running for decades do not dissolve in a week of sincere intention. But the process is real. It is available to any person willing to engage it genuinely. And it produces genuine, durable shifts in the signal that produce corresponding shifts in what the responsive universe returns. One of the most immediately actionable steps toward shifting the signal is the deliberate cultivation of genuine appreciation for something real and present in your current life, not as a strategy for tricking the universe into giving you more by pretending to be satisfied with less, but as the specific practice of producing a genuine emotional state that is fundamentally different from the chronic dissatisfaction signal most people are unconsciously broadcasting. Genuine appreciation held with real felt quality rather than performed as a verbal exercise shifts the heart's electromagnetic field from the incoherent patterns associated with stress and chronic negative emotion toward the coherent patterns associated with the high-frequency states of care, love, and genuine gratitude. This shift is measurable in minutes, practiced consistently over weeks. It begins to change the ambient emotional baseline from which the signal is being generated, which changes what the signal contains, which changes what the responsive world returns. The signal you have been sending has been producing the results you have been experiencing. This is not a statement of blame. It is a statement of genuine hope, because it means that the results can change the moment the signal genuinely changes, and the signal can genuinely change the moment you begin the specific inner work that changes the subconscious programs generating it. The chapters ahead are that work, approached from different angles with different tools, all aimed at the same fundamental shift. From a signal organized around the emotional patterns of lack, fear, and chronic insufficient, toward a signal organized around the genuinely felt experience of abundance, safety, and the specific quality of open expectation that the universe responds to with the corresponding abundance it has always been available to provide. Chapter 3. The Surrender That Is Not Giving Up. One of the most counterintuitive teachings in the entire body of wisdom this audiobook draws from is the principle of surrender as a creative act rather than a defeat. This teaching gets misunderstood constantly because the word surrender carries so many associations with weakness, passivity, and the abandonment of genuine desire that the moment it appears in a conversation about achieving what you want, most people immediately assume that what is being recommended is the very thing they have been resisting, accepting less than what they genuinely want, and calling the acceptance spiritual maturity. This is not what genuine surrender means in this context. Genuine surrender is the specific release of the anxious, controlling, desperate relationship with the desired outcome, not the release of the outcome itself. The distinction is not subtle. It is the difference between the thing that blocks manifestation and the thing that allows it to flow. The mechanism through which anxious attachment to a desired outcome actually blocks that outcome is one of the most practically important pieces of understanding in this entire audiobook. When a desire is held with genuine desperation, with the emotional quality of "I need this to happen" or "I cannot be okay," the dominant emotional signal being broadcast is organized around need, lack, and the specific experience of not yet having. The universe, as a responsive system, receives the signal of not yet having, and responds with more of the same, not as punishment, but as the faithful reflection of the dominant inner state. The desperate wanting is itself the signal of insufficiency, and insufficiency is precisely what the responsive system amplifies and returns. This is why the person who wants something most desperately is often the last one to receive it, while the person who desires something with genuine ease and genuine openness tends to find it arriving with an efficiency that the desperate person, looking on, attributes to luck. Genuine surrender involves a specific psychological movement that is easier to describe than to actually accomplish in the presence of something that feels urgently needed. It is the movement from the emotional state of needing the outcome to produce your sense of okayness to the emotional state of being genuinely okay, regardless of the outcome, while still genuinely desiring it. This is not pretense. It is not the performance of not caring about something you actually care about. It is the genuine cultivation of an inner stability that does not depend on any specific external circumstance for its fundamental quality, from which the desire can be held with genuine openness rather than with the grasping quality that paradoxically repels what is sought. Mystics across traditions have described this state, each in their own vocabulary, pointing consistently toward the same fundamental inner condition: desire without desperation, wanting without needing, moving toward without clinging to. The practical pathway to genuine surrender runs through the development of what might be called present moment adequacy. The genuine felt sense that the present moment, exactly as it is, contains sufficient ground to stand on. This is distinct from contentment with all current circumstances, which may or may not be warranted, depending on the circumstances. It is the specific experience of your own inner resources, your own consciousness, your own capacity to be present as genuinely sufficient to meet whatever the current moment contains. Separate from whether the current moment contains what you would have chosen. This experience, cultivated deliberately through the practices of genuine stillness, genuine appreciation for what is immediately real, and the honest examination of what actually constitutes a stable foundation in your inner life, is the specific ground from which genuine surrender becomes not a spiritual ideal, but an actually available psychological state. There is a specific paradox that almost every person who has done genuine manifestation work has encountered at the level of direct personal experience. The moment you genuinely release the desperate clinging to a particular outcome, the outcome often begins to move toward you with a speed and an ease that the previous months of desperate wanting never produced. This is not magic, and it is not coincidence. It is the direct reflection of the signal shift that genuine surrender produces. The moment the dominant inner state shifts from the broadcasting of insufficiency and desperate need toward the broadcasting of genuine okayness, combined with open desire, the external response begins to shift in kind. The shift in the signal precedes the shift in the circumstances, which is why the shift in circumstances so often seems to arrive unexpectedly, right at the moment when the person has finally, genuinely, stopped fighting for it with the specific quality of fighting that was repelling it. Surrender, in the practical dimension of daily life, does not mean withdrawing from action or abandoning the specific steps and efforts that move a desired outcome toward manifestation. It means taking those actions from a different inner position than the anxious, straining, outcome-dependent position that characterizes effortful striving. The action taken from genuine inner stability, from the place of I am doing this because it is the right next step, and I trust the process rather than I am doing this because I desperately need it to produce a specific result, has a different quality in every dimension. In the quality of attention brought to it, in the creative flexibility available within it, in the openness to unexpected pathways that arise in its course, and in the electromagnetic signal broadcast by the person taking it. The action itself may be identical in content. The inner state from which it is taken produces genuinely different effects. One specific practice for beginning to cultivate genuine surrender is the practice of deliberate release statements, held with genuine emotional engagement, rather than as a verbal formula. A release statement sounds something like, "I genuinely desire this outcome, and I am willing to trust that the highest version of my desire is already moving toward me in the perfect form and the perfect timing, even if that form and timing look different from what I have been imagining." This is not resignation. It is the specific combination of genuine desire and genuine trust that constitutes what faith actually means as a functional psychological state. Holding this orientation consistently, particularly in the moments when anxiety about the desired outcome is most intense, is not comfortable, but it is the specific inner movement that shifts the signal from the broadcasting of desperate insufficiency toward the broadcasting of confident expectation, which is a categorically different signal with categorically different results. The universe does not obey desperate commands. It responds to the quality of the inner state from which those commands arise. When that inner state is organized around genuine trust, genuine open desire, and the specific sufficiency of genuine surrender, what was previously experienced as an unresponsive universe withholding desired outcomes begins to reveal itself as something it has always been, a system faithfully responsive to the signals it receives, now finally receiving a signal, organized around the kind of open, trusting, non-grasping desire that the system can actually respond to fully. This is the counterintuitive heart of this chapter's teaching, and it is the specific shift that most consistently transforms the experience of nothing working into the experience of everything beginning, gradually, and then all at once, to work. Chapter 4. The Subconscious Blueprint Running Your Life. Imagine a building that was designed by an architect who has since died, built to a specific blueprint, and that is now occupied by someone who finds various features of the building inconvenient or uncomfortable, but who has never actually seen the blueprint, and therefore has no way of understanding why the building keeps producing the same problems, regardless of how the furniture is rearranged or the walls are repainted. The new occupant tries to fix the plumbing and discovers the pipes run in a pattern that makes the fix temporary. They try to improve the lighting and find that the electrical layout resists every efficient solution. They try to expand a room and discover that the load-bearing walls are positioned in ways that prevent every obvious approach to the expansion. Each of these problems traces back to the original blueprint, but because the blueprint is invisible to the occupant, each problem appears to be a separate challenge unrelated to the others. This is the situation of most adults in their own lives. The subconscious blueprint is the specific collection of beliefs, expectations, identity programs, and relational templates that were installed primarily during early childhood, and that now function as the invisible architecture, generating the recurring patterns of your adult life. This blueprint determines what your nervous system treats as normal, and the concept of normal here is critical because the subconscious does not orient toward what is objectively good for you. It orients toward what is familiar. The experience of abundance, genuine love, consistent success, and deep peace feel threatening rather than welcome to a subconscious blueprint that was built in conditions of scarcity, conditional love, inconsistent outcomes, and chronic low-level anxiety. Not threatening in a conscious sense. Threatening in the specific sense that they contradict the blueprint, which the subconscious is programmed to maintain with the same faithful insistence with which a thermostat maintains a particular temperature. The thermostat metaphor, while familiar in personal development conversations, deserves careful elaboration because it captures the mechanism of the blueprint with unusual precision. A thermostat does not want a particular temperature. It simply maintains one. When the temperature rises above the set point, the thermostat activates cooling to bring it back down. When it drops below, the thermostat activates heating to bring it back up. The result is that the temperature stays near the set point, regardless of what the weather is doing outside. The subconscious blueprint operates identically. When circumstances rise above the blueprint's set point, whether financially, relationally, or in terms of external recognition and opportunity, the subconscious activates whatever behavioral, perceptual, or interpretive mechanisms are available to bring circumstances back toward the familiar level. This is what self-sabotage actually is: the thermostat doing its job. Identifying the specific set points of your own subconscious blueprint requires looking at the stable patterns of your life rather than its variable events. Events fluctuate, and pattern is what the blueprint produces when the fluctuations are averaged out. The pattern of your financial life across different jobs, different strategies, and different years tells you something genuine about the financial set point of your blueprint. The pattern of your relational dynamics across different partners and different periods tells you something genuine about your relational blueprint. The pattern of how close to specific kinds of success you consistently get before something reliably intervenes, whether internally or externally, tells you something genuine about the achievement ceiling your blueprint has been maintaining. These patterns are not destiny. They are the current programming available for genuine revision through the specific work this audiobook describes. The specific beliefs that constitute the subconscious blueprint were not formed through deliberate philosophical reflection. They were formed through the experience of a child in a particular environment, drawing conclusions from what they observed and what they experienced. With the limited contextual understanding available to a developing mind, the child who grew up in an environment where emotional expression was treated as weakness formed a belief about the relationship between vulnerability and safety. The child who grew up watching adults relate to money through chronic anxiety formed a belief about money as a source of danger. The child who experienced the love of caregivers as consistently conditional formed a belief about what is required to be worthy of care. None of these beliefs were chosen. All of them became the blueprint, and all of them are currently producing their characteristic patterns in the adult life of the person who has never seen them clearly as beliefs, rather than simply as the way things are. Seeing the blueprint clearly for the first time is typically accompanied by a complex emotional experience that includes genuine recognition, something like the specific quality of finally understanding why a persistent problem has been so persistent, alongside genuine grief for the years in which the blueprint operated without ever being examined. This grief is appropriate and should be given whatever space it needs, because bypassing it in the name of quickly moving to the solution tends to leave it unprocessed in ways that ultimately slow the genuine revision of the blueprint. But grief is not the destination. Recognition is the destination, because recognition converts the invisible architecture into something visible, and visible architecture can be deliberately revised in ways that invisible architecture simply cannot be. The revision of the subconscious blueprint does not happen through a single insight, however powerful. It happens through the consistent, patient application of the specific tools that actually reach the subconscious level. Repetition in the specific emotional states that opens subconscious receptivity. Vivid imaginative rehearsal of new patterns with genuine felt quality. The deliberate accumulation of experiential evidence that contradicts the old blueprint at the lived level rather than only at the conceptual one, and the specific practices during the brainwave windows of highest subconscious accessibility that allow new programming to settle at the depth where the old programming is currently operating. Each of these tools is addressed across the chapters of this audiobook. What this chapter provides is the map of the territory. The clear, honest understanding of what the blueprint is, where it came from, and why addressing it, rather than the circumstances it is producing, is the specific intervention that changes everything. The universe responds to the blueprint. When the blueprint operates from a set point of scarcity, the universe faithfully produces experiences of scarcity. When the blueprint is revised to operate from a set point of genuine abundance, the universe shifts its response to match. This is not magic, and it is not the product of external cosmic adjustment. It is the direct, mechanistic result of the interchange producing different perception, different behavior, different electromagnetic broadcast, and different patterns of interaction that together generate genuinely different external results. The blueprint is the source. The circumstances are the output. And the source, finally located and finally understood, is the specific thing you can actually do something about. Chapter 5. Feeling the future before it arrives. The most widely misunderstood aspect of how manifestation actually works is the relationship between feeling and time. Most people assume that feeling follows from external reality. You feel abundant when you have enough. You feel loved when your relationships are nourishing. You feel confident when you have evidence of your own competence accumulated across genuine successes. This assumption seems so obvious that questioning it requires a deliberate effort of genuine imagination. But it is precisely backward from how the creative mechanism of consciousness actually operates. Feeling is not the result of external reality. It is one of the primary causes of it, and the specific practice of genuinely feeling the future state before external evidence of that state exists is not a cognitive trick or a motivational device. It is the direct activation of the creative mechanism through which inner state produces outer circumstance. Neville Goddard, one of the most influential teachers in the metaphysical tradition this audiobook draws from, described the essential practice of manifestation as occupying the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This phrase, simple in its construction, describes something genuinely sophisticated in its application. To occupy the feeling of the wish fulfilled is not to pretend that external circumstances have already changed when they have not. It is to genuinely inhabit, at the level of felt experience rather than merely cognitive acknowledgement, the emotional and physiological state of someone for whom the desired outcome has already become real. The specific quality of that felt state, held with genuine depth and genuine consistency, constitutes a signal qualitatively different from the signal of wanting something that has not yet arrived. And this qualitatively different signal produces qualitatively different responses from the inner and outer systems that determine what gets created. The brain's inability to clearly distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and an actually occurring one is the neurological mechanism through which feeling the future before it arrives produces genuine effects at the level of the subconscious. When you vividly imagine a scenario with genuine sensory and emotional richness, the brain activates many of the same neural pathways that would activate during the actual experience of that scenario. Research on mental rehearsal in athletic contexts has demonstrated this repeatedly. Athletes who practice mental rehearsal of their performance with genuine sensory and emotional vividness show measurable improvement in actual performance through neural activation patterns, substantially identical to those produced by actual physical practice. The same mechanism operates in the context of manifestation work. The brain being given the vivid, emotionally genuine experience of the desired outcome is receiving genuine rehearsal of the neural patterns associated with that outcome, which then shapes perception, behavior, and electromagnetic broadcast in ways that move the external world toward alignment with the internally rehearsed state. The specific challenge of this practice is the genuine difficulty of producing authentic felt experience of a state that contradicts current external reality. The person whose bank account genuinely contains insufficient funds finds it difficult to genuinely feel abundance rather than simply performing a verbal claim of abundance, while the felt reality of insufficiency remains unchanged. This difficulty is not evidence that the practice is invalid. It is the specific resistance that makes the practice important. The gap between the current felt reality and the desired felt reality is precisely the gap that the practice of feeling the future is designed to bridge. And bridging it requires the specific skill of accessing genuine positive emotional states through means that are not dependent on external confirmation. Emotional recall is one of the most reliable and most immediately accessible tools for producing genuine positive emotional states in the present moment, regardless of current external circumstances. The technique involves deliberately remembering a specific past experience of the emotion being cultivated, reconstructing it with as much sensory and emotional detail as possible, and allowing the genuine felt quality of that past experience to become present in the body in the current moment. A genuine past experience of abundance, however brief and however different in scale from the abundance being desired, can be recalled with sufficient vividness to produce a real present moment activation of the physiological and emotional patterns associated with abundance. That activation is then the genuine felt state of abundance from which the visualization of the desired future can proceed with the authentic emotional quality that makes it an effective rehearsal rather than a detached mental movie. Visualization practices work most powerfully when approached as genuine, experiential immersion rather than as observed mental cinema. The distinction matters enormously in practice. Watching yourself in a mental movie, observing the desired scene from an external perspective, as if watching a film in which you are the protagonist, produces considerably less genuine neural activation and considerably less felt emotional quality than stepping fully inside the imagined experience, seeing what you would see, hearing what you would hear, and feeling in the body what you would feel if the desired scenario were actually occurring right now. The inside perspective converts the visualization from cognitive exercise to genuine experiential rehearsal, which is the specific quality required to produce the subconscious impression that shifts the blueprint from its current setting toward the setting of the desired future. The timing of this practice matters in a way that most treatments of visualization fail to emphasize adequately. The minutes immediately before sleep and the minutes immediately after waking are periods of naturally heightened subconscious receptivity, during which the brain's filtering and critical functions are partially suspended, and the subconscious is more directly accessible to new impressions than during the analytically active hours of ordinary waking life. Practicing the vivid, emotionally genuine feeling of the desired future specifically during these windows, consistently across weeks and months, deposits the rehearsal directly into the subconscious at the depth where the old blueprint is operating, gradually revising that blueprint from the inside with the specific felt experience that the changed blueprint would generate in a person who was genuinely living from the new set point. Feeling the future before it arrives is not a passive activity. It is an active, skillful inner practice that requires genuine effort of imagination, genuine cultivation of emotional authenticity, and genuine consistency across the repetitions required to produce lasting subconscious impression. But it is effort of an entirely different character from the effortful striving of trying to force external circumstances into alignment through sheer outer action and willpower. It is effort directed at the source rather than at the symptom, and effort at the source produces genuine, durable change at the level where the change is actually needed. The universe responds to felt states. When the felt state genuinely changes, the response genuinely changes. And when nothing external seems to be working, this is the specific inner work that changes everything. Chapter 6. Energy Alignment and the Path of Least Resistance. Everything in the physical universe tends to move along the path of least resistance. Water finds the easiest route downhill. Electricity travels the most conductive pathway. Heat moves from concentrated to distributed in whatever direction allows the exchange to happen most efficiently. These are not choices made by inanimate physical systems. They are descriptions of how energy behaves in a universe governed by laws that operate consistently regardless of human preference. Human energy operates by the same fundamental laws, which means that whatever a person is genuinely aligned with, whatever direction the sum total of their beliefs, expectations, emotions, and subconscious patterns is pointing, that is the direction toward which their life energy flows most readily and most productively. The experience of persistent difficulty and persistent non-manifestation is almost always the experience of trying to push life energy in a direction that is misaligned with the actual configuration of the inner world. Energy alignment, in the practical context of this audiobook's teachings, refers to the specific condition in which what you consciously desire and what your subconscious believes is genuinely available to you, are pointing in the same direction simultaneously. This condition is rarer than most people realize because most people's conscious desires are running significantly ahead of their subconscious beliefs about what is genuinely available to someone of their particular identity and history. The conscious mind can desire extraordinary success, while the subconscious carries the deeply installed belief that people from this background do not achieve extraordinary things. The conscious mind can desire profound love, while the subconscious operates from the belief that genuine intimacy is ultimately unsafe. The conscious mind can desire financial abundance, while the subconscious runs a program that treats money as chronically insufficient and prosperity as something that belongs to other different kinds of people. These misalignments between conscious desire and subconscious belief are the energy dams producing the experience of nothing working despite genuine effort. Finding where your energy is genuinely aligned, as distinct from where you consciously wish it were aligned, is one of the more honest and more uncomfortable diagnostic exercises available in any genuine inner work practice. The diagnostic is simple. Look at what your life is consistently producing, rather than at what you are consistently trying to produce. The consistent results are the output of the actual alignment. The intentions are the output of the conscious mind's preferences. Where these differ, the alignment is off, and the energy is spending itself in the specific kind of internal conflict between what is consciously wanted and what is subconsciously expected that produces the exhaustion of effort without corresponding result. This exhaustion is the specific symptom of misalignment rather than of insufficient effort, which is why more effort applied to the same direction rarely produces proportionally more result when the fundamental misalignment has not been addressed. The path of least resistance for your energy is not necessarily the path of your most comfortable habits. Comfortable habits are often the path of least resistance for the old, established pattern, rather than for the genuine desire that the old pattern is blocking. A person whose established pattern involves chronic overwork and chronic neglect of genuine rest will find that their energy flows most readily toward more overwork because that is what the pattern's grooves direct it toward. But this is not the same as saying that overwork is the path of least resistance for that person's deepest creative and relational desires, which are likely being systematically starved by the same overwork pattern that feels so natural and so energetically familiar. The path of least resistance for genuine manifestation is not the path of the old pattern. It is the path of genuine alignment between conscious desire and subconscious belief, which often requires genuine work to establish, rather than being the path that feels immediately easy. Identifying specific misalignments in your energy system requires the particular quality of honest self-observation that this entire audiobook consistently recommends across every dimension of inner work. The specific question worth sitting with in each significant life domain is, if I am being completely honest with myself about what I actually believe is available to me in this area, not what I want to believe or what I think I should believe, but what I genuinely expect at the felt level, what does that honest inner answer reveal? In the domain of money, what do I actually expect? In the domain of love, what do I actually anticipate receiving? In the domain of professional recognition, What do I genuinely believe is available to someone of my background, my history, my particular combination of qualities? The honest answers to these questions reveal the actual alignment configuration, which is the starting point for the genuine revision work that produces lasting change. The specific tools for revising misalignment and creating genuine energy coherence between conscious desire and subconscious belief are the same tools described across the chapters of this entire audiobook, applied with the specific understanding that the goal is not merely to add positive beliefs on top of existing negative ones, but to genuinely revise the subconscious programs that have been generating the misalignment. This revision requires the sustained, emotionally genuine repetition described throughout this audiobook, combined with the specific willingness to feel the desired state genuinely, rather than to only think about it, and the patient accumulation of genuine behavioral evidence that contradicts the old subconscious belief by demonstrating through actual lived experience that the old belief is not as absolute a truth as the subconscious has been treating it. When genuine alignment is achieved, even partially, something changes in the texture of daily life that is recognizable before major external circumstances have shifted. Effort stops feeling like upstream swimming. Opportunities that require only modest effort begin appearing with an ease and a frequency that contrasts noticeably with the previous experience of everything requiring maximum effort for minimal return. Synchronicities, the meaningful coincidences described by Carl Jung that suggest a kind of coordination between inner state and outer event that ordinary causal logic cannot fully account for, begin appearing with a regularity that becomes genuinely difficult to dismiss as simple coincidence. These are the early signals that the inner alignment is shifting, arriving in advance of the more dramatic outer changes that follow as the new alignment consolidates and deepens across months of sustained practice. The universe obeys the law of alignment in the specific sense that it responds to the coherent inner signal produced when conscious desire and subconscious belief are genuinely moving in the same direction. This coherent signal produces the path of least resistance for the energy that was previously spending itself in internal conflict. And along that path of least resistance, the desired outcomes move from the realm of what is wished for, but not genuinely expected, into the realm of what is genuinely anticipated, and therefore genuinely approached with the specific quality of open, confident expectation that the responsive universe finally has something coherent to work with and respond to. This is what it means for the universe to obey, not the granting of wishes by an external power, but the faithful response of a coherent system to the coherent signal of genuine inner alignment. Chapter 7. The words you must stop using. Now language is the most continuously available and most consistently underestimated programming tool in the human experience. Every word you speak, and more significantly, every phrase you repeat habitually across the ordinary hours of an ordinary day, is an instruction being delivered to the subconscious mind with the specific quality of an instruction from a trusted authority figure. The subconscious does not evaluate whether the instruction is good for you. It does not note the ironic or humorous tone in which self-deprecating comments are made. It does not distinguish between a statement made in passing and a statement made with genuine, deliberate intention. It simply receives whatever is repeatedly offered with genuine, emotional authenticity and faithfully incorporates it into the operating program it is continuously building and reinforcing. The person who habitually says things like, "I never catch a break," or "I am terrible with money," or "I always seem to attract the wrong kind of situation," is providing the subconscious with a continuous stream of precise programming instructions that the subconscious then faithfully executes. The specific words, most consequential for immediate revision, are not the obviously negative declarations that most people already know they should not be making. They are the habitual, conversational, easily overlooked phrases that pervade ordinary speech, precisely because they feel like neutral descriptions, rather than like the powerful programming instructions they actually are. Phrases like "I can never seem to," or "It always turns out this way for me," or "I just don't have what it takes for," or "People like me don't usually," are not casual conversational fillers. They are identity-level programming instructions delivered with the emotional authenticity of genuine felt experience, which is precisely the combination the subconscious treats as high-priority input. Each repetition of such a phrase reinforces the neural pathway associated with the limiting belief it contains, making the belief more automatic, more physiologically real, and more pervasively influential in the filtering of perception and the generation of behavior. The word always deserves particular attention in this chapter because it is one of the most linguistically potent and most consistently misused words in the ordinary speech of people struggling with persistent limiting patterns. When you say, "I always have trouble with X," you are not making an empirical claim that requires genuine evaluation of frequency. You are making an identity claim. The experience of trouble with X is a defining feature of who I am. The subconscious receives it as identity programming, and the specific feature of identity programming is that the subconscious works actively to maintain identity consistency, which means it will now work actively to ensure that the experience of trouble with X continues, because that experience has been defined as part of the identity it is maintaining. The solution is not merely replacing always with sometimes. It is the more fundamental revision of the identity claim itself toward a description of genuine movement rather than permanent characteristic. Never operates through the same mechanism as always, but in the opposite direction. I never seem to attract good opportunities. I never seem to be in the right place at the right time. I never can seem to make this work. Each never statement converts what is actually a pattern of frequency into a statement of absolute impossibility. And absolute impossibility is the specific belief configuration most resistant to revision because it forecloses the specific quality of genuine expectation, without which the experience of genuine possibility cannot arise. The subconscious that has been instructed through repeated never statements that a particular category of good is simply unavailable to this person will reliably filter perception to remove that category of good from conscious awareness, ensuring that the never statement is continuously, experientially confirmed, regardless of what is actually present in the environment. Beginning the revision of habitual limiting language does not require the performance of relentless positivity disconnected from genuine emotional experience. The goal is not to replace every honest acknowledgement of genuine difficulty with forced declarations of perfection that carry no authentic emotional weight. The goal is the specific linguistic practice of describing genuine challenge without cementing it as permanent identity or as absolute impossibility, while simultaneously introducing language that describes genuine movement toward the desired direction, held with the emotional authenticity that gives language its programming power. I have been finding this challenging, and I am genuinely working through it is both honest and generative. It acknowledges current experience without programming the subconscious, with the identity of someone for whom this challenge is a permanent, defining feature. The practice of deliberate affirmative language is the positive dimension of this chapter's work, and it deserves the specific treatment of honest acknowledgement that the mechanical, emotionally flat repetition of positive phrases produces minimal, lasting effect. An affirmation that is recited without genuine felt connection to what it expresses is received by the subconscious as low-priority background noise rather than as meaningful programming instruction. The same statement held with genuine emotion, even a gentle and quiet, genuine emotion rather than a dramatic, performed enthusiasm, produces a qualitatively different impression. The gateway to genuine emotion in affirmation practice is specificity and present tense construction. Specific enough that it connects to something real in your experience, rather than remaining abstract, and present tense enough that it describes a current reality, being cultivated rather than a future possibility being wished for. The words you use when talking to yourself about yourself, in the internal conversation that runs continuously below the surface of engaged daily activity, are perhaps more consequential than the words used in external conversation, because the internal conversation has no social context that might moderate its tone, no audience that might respond to its content and provide corrective feedback, and no external reality check that might occasionally interrupt the most extreme versions of its limiting assertions. The habitual inner monologue of most people contains a level of harsh self-criticism and limiting self-definition that would never be tolerated in an external relationship, precisely because it occurs in the privacy of internal experience where its patterns never become visible enough to be genuinely examined and revised. Making the internal monologue genuinely conscious, not through obsessive monitoring, but through the gentle, non-judgmental noticing that the practice of inner observation develops over time, is the first step toward revising it in the direction of something that actually supports the life you are genuinely trying to build. The language shifts described throughout this chapter are not surface-level cosmetic changes. They are the linguistic dimension of genuine subconscious reprogramming, operating through the same mechanism of repetition and emotional resonance that installed the original limiting programs. Every habitual limiting phrase, revised toward more generative language, is one less iteration of the old program and one more iteration of the new one. Every moment of catching a never or an always in your speech before it exits, and choosing a more accurate, more generative description instead is a genuine exercise of the kind of conscious authorship over your own inner programming that produces real, cumulative, durable change in what the inner world is broadcasting, and therefore in what the outer world is faithfully returning. Chapter 8. Raising Your Frequency. What it actually means. The phrase raise your frequency appears in almost every modern discussion of manifestation and consciousness, typically used with a casual ease that suggests the meaning is obvious and the method is simple. Neither is accurate. The concept of frequency in the human context is not a metaphor casually borrowed from physics to make spiritual teaching sound scientifically legitimate. It is a description of something genuinely measurable about how the human body's electromagnetic field, driven by the emotional states of the person generating it, interacts with the surrounding environment in ways that produce corresponding patterns of experience. Understanding what frequency actually refers to in this context, rather than simply repeating the phrase as a slogan, is the prerequisite for understanding what raising it actually requires, and why that raising produces the specific effects on external experience that it does. The human body is a bioelectromagnetic system. Every nerve impulse is an electrical event. Every heartbeat generates an electromagnetic field. Every cell communicates through electrochemical signals. The heart's electromagnetic field, the strongest in the body, extends several feet beyond the physical body in all directions and carries specific patterned information about the dominant emotional state of the person generating it. Research has established that this field changes measurably in coherence and in pattern, depending on whether the generating emotional state is one of the positive states, such as genuine appreciation, compassion, and care, or one of the stress states, such as anxiety, frustration, and chronic low-grade fear. The coherent patterns produced by positive states are specifically associated with improved cognitive function, improved immune response, improved interpersonal connection quality, and the kind of open, receptive inner state from which genuine creative insight and genuine manifestation most readily emerge. Raising your frequency means, in practical terms, consistently cultivating the inner states associated with the coherent electromagnetic patterns rather than those associated with the incoherent ones. This is not a moral prescription dressed in scientific vocabulary. It is a description of the specific inner work that produces the physiological and electromagnetic conditions from which the experiences most people describe as desired, including genuine abundance, genuine connection, genuine creative expression, and genuine health, are most naturally generated and most readily sustained. The low-frequency states of chronic fear, chronic resentment, chronic inadequacy, and chronic dissatisfaction produce the specific physiological and electromagnetic conditions from which those experiences are most consistently blocked, not because the universe is withholding them, but because the conditions required for them to arise are not present when those inner states are dominant. The practices that most reliably raise frequency fall into several categories that together address the full spectrum of the inner system. Genuine gratitude practices address the emotional dimension, shifting the dominant felt state from the chronic dissatisfaction signal toward the coherent appreciation signal. Physical practices, particularly those involving breath and movement, address the physiological dimension, directly shifting the nervous system from the sympathetic dominance of chronic stress toward the parasympathetic regulation of genuine rest and receptivity. Contemplative practices, including formal meditation and any other form of genuine, deliberate stillness, address the attentional dimension, training the mind's capacity for sustained positive focus, rather than the habitual drift toward whatever anxiety or resentment is most loudly demanding attention. And the specific practices of vivid positive visualization, during the brainwave windows of highest subconscious receptivity. Address the programming dimension, directly revising the subconscious patterns that generate the low-frequency states automatically. The specific high-frequency state most consistently associated with the most rapid and most dramatic manifestation results across the literature of this tradition is genuine gratitude combined with genuine appreciation for what is immediately present. This combination is not simply pleasant. It is the specific inner condition that produces the most coherent heart-field pattern, the most open and creative cognitive state, the most genuinely receptive perceptual filter, and the most powerful positive signal in the electromagnetic broadcast that the surrounding environment and the people within it respond to. The person who can genuinely inhabit this state across a significant portion of their waking hours is occupying a fundamentally different inner position than the person whose dominant state is characterized by chronic dissatisfaction and the specific waiting quality of, "I will feel good when the circumstances improve." The challenge of raising frequency when external circumstances are genuinely difficult is the specific challenge that gives this chapter its practical importance. It is straightforward to feel genuine appreciation and genuine positive expectation when everything in the external world is confirming that things are going well. The specific skill required for genuine frequency raising is the ability to cultivate and sustain these inner states even when, especially when, the external evidence does not yet support them. This is not positive thinking in the sense of ignoring or denying the genuine difficulty of current circumstances. It is the specific cultivation of inner states that are not dependent on external confirmation for their quality, which requires both the understanding of why this cultivation matters and the specific practices that make it genuinely possible rather than a performance of positivity that lacks authentic emotional ground. The path of raising frequency is not linear. People who genuinely engage this work do not simply feel better and better in an unbroken progression from low states to high ones. They encounter old patterns that pull them back toward familiar lower states, experience setbacks that temporarily dislodge whatever progress has been made, and navigate the specific frustration of working diligently at inner practices without seeing immediate corresponding changes in external circumstances. What distinguishes the person who eventually experiences genuine, durable frequency elevation from the one who gives up before the cumulative work has had time to produce visible results is not talent for this work, not special spiritual gifts, and not the specific practices they have adopted. It is the quality of patient, compassionate, consistent engagement with the work across the setbacks and the plateaus, combined with the genuine understanding that the work is proceeding whether or not the external evidence of its progress is yet visible. When frequency genuinely rises and stays elevated as a new baseline rather than returning to the old default, the change in external experience that follows is not the dramatic, instantaneous arrival of everything desired all at once. It is the more gradual but unmistakable shift in the quality of ordinary daily experience, the ease with which connections that feel genuinely nourishing appear, the frequency with which opportunities relevant to genuine desires become visible and accessible, and the specific quality of things flowing rather than being forced that characterizes the experience of a person whose inner signal has genuinely shifted to one the universe can respond to with the abundance It has always been available to provide to whoever genuinely sends the corresponding signal. Chapter 9. The void between prayer and answer. There is a specific period that almost everyone who has genuinely worked with the principles in this audiobook will recognize. The period between the genuine inner shift and the visible outer manifestation of that shift. This period, which traditions across cultures have variously named the dark night of the soul, the wilderness, the void, or simply the waiting, is one of the most frequently misnavigated dimensions of genuine manifestation work. It is the period during which the inner work has genuinely been done. The old programs have genuinely begun to shift. The new signal has genuinely begun to transmit, and yet the external world has not yet caught up to reflect these inner changes. During this period, every aspect of the circumstantial evidence available to the conscious mind suggests that nothing has changed, and possibly that nothing ever will, while the actual reality is that everything important has already changed at the causal level, and the outer world is simply in the process of reorganizing to reflect it. Understanding this period accurately is not a luxury. It is functionally essential, because the specific risk of the void is that the person who has done genuine inner work will interpret the absence of immediate visible results as evidence that the inner work did not produce change. Respond by abandoning the inner work and reverting to old patterns, and thereby undo the genuine progress that was being made right at the moment when the external evidence of that progress was about to become visible. This is the specific tragedy of the last mile failure. The person who runs 9.5 miles and then turns back right before the finish, genuinely believing they have not moved far enough from the starting point to have made meaningful progress, when in fact they were within steps of completing the journey. The void is not evidence of failure. It is the necessary gap between inner cause and outer effect, and navigating it with the specific inner qualities of patient faith and continued genuine practice is the specific skill that determines who crosses to the other side. Every tradition that has genuinely engaged with the mechanism of consciousness and manifestation has something to say about this gap, because it is universal to the experience of anyone who pursues genuine inner transformation rather than only surface-level behavioral change. The Sufi mystics called it the Valley of Astonishment, the place where everything the seeker thought they knew is revealed as insufficient and the true understanding has not yet fully arrived. The Christian contemplatives described it as the dark night of the soul, the period of apparent spiritual desolation that precedes genuine illumination. The Zen tradition speaks of the experience of great doubt, the specific state of not knowing that must be genuinely inhabited before genuine breakthrough becomes available. Different vocabularies, different cultural contexts, same essential description of the same essential experience. The gap between genuine inner transformation and the outer evidence of it, the specific practical challenge of the void, is the maintenance of genuine inner orientation toward the desired outcome, without collapsing back into the desperate wanting or the anxious doubting that produced the old signal. This is genuinely difficult because the void provides almost no positive external reinforcement for continued inner work, and the human mind, under conditions of prolonged non-reinforcement, tends toward the specific cynicism that says this was never going to work, compounded by the cultural messaging that frames continued positive orientation in the face of contradicting evidence as delusion rather than as genuine faith. Navigating the void requires the specific combination of deep, genuine understanding of why the gap exists and what it means, and the genuine inner stability that does not depend on external confirmation for its maintenance. Staying connected to the genuine felt experience of the desired outcome during the void through the specific practices of visualization, emotional cultivation, and grateful anticipation described across this audiobook is the functional equivalent of continuing to water a garden during the period between planting and the first visible shoots appearing above the soil. The growth is happening underground in a form that is not yet visible to surface inspection. The watering determines whether the growth that has already begun will continue toward visible expression or will wither in the absence of the sustaining practice that it requires. Giving up the practice during the void because the garden looks empty from the surface is the specific action that ensures the seeds will not become what they were already becoming at the level where becoming was genuinely happening. Genuine signs of progress during the void, recognizable to the person who knows what to look for, typically begin appearing before any dramatic external changes have occurred. These early signs include the changing quality of the inner experience itself, the sense that the old, anxious, straining quality of wanting something desperately is beginning to be replaced, on good days and in good moments, by something closer to genuine openness and genuine expectation. They include the occurrence of synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that suggest a shift in what the environment is reflecting back, occurring with a new frequency that goes beyond what ordinary probability would predict. They include the spontaneous arising of specific inspired ideas, specific relational connections, or specific next steps that feel different from the effortful strategizing that preceded them, carrying the quality of genuine guidance rather than desperate plan-making. These are the shoots beginning to appear above the soil. Faith in the void is not naive optimism disconnected from genuine self-knowledge. It is the specific trust earned through genuine understanding of the mechanism, rather than simply adopted as a belief because it feels more pleasant than doubt, that the inner changes genuinely made are producing corresponding outer changes in the specific order that the mechanism operates. Inner first, then outer, with a gap between them whose length depends on the depth of the original patterns being revised and the consistency of the new practice being applied. Understanding this sequence transforms the experience of the void from the specific despair of nothing working into the specific patient trust of everything working at the level where working is currently happening, with the outer evidence on its way in the time frame that genuine change at this level actually requires. The person who learns to navigate the void, not perfectly, and not without the moments of genuine doubt and genuine discouragement that any genuine journey through it includes, but with enough genuine understanding and enough genuine inner stability to continue the practice rather than abandon it, is the person who emerges on the other side into the experience that every genuine tradition has described as the fruit of this work. The specific quality of inner freedom that does not depend on external circumstances for its foundation, combined with the specific abundance of outer experience that seems to flow almost effortlessly toward someone whose inner signal is genuinely clear, genuinely coherent, and genuinely aligned with the receiving of what was always available to the person who learned to hold themselves open for it. Chapter 10. The identity shift that changes everything. Every other shift described in this audiobook, the shift in belief, in emotional state, in language, in frequency, in the signal being broadcast, ultimately rests on and is stabilized by one more fundamental shift that is either its foundation or its absence. That shift is the shift in identity, the specific revision of the deepest subconscious sense of who you are and what kind of person you are. Identity is the most consequential dimension of the subconscious program because it is the organizing principle from which every other subconscious pattern draws its consistency and its persistence. Beliefs about what is available to you, expectations about how situations will unfold, habitual emotional responses to various types of experience, and the specific ways you perceive opportunity and interpret challenge. All of these are organized around and consistent with the underlying identity program. Change the identity program genuinely, and everything organized around it begins to change accordingly. Leave the identity program unchanged, and every other revision will be continuously undermined by the consistency mechanisms that the identity program activates to restore coherence. The identity program is not the same as the self-image in the ordinary sense of how you consciously think about yourself. The self-image operates at the conscious level and is available for deliberate revision through simple decision in a way that the identity program is not. You can decide to think of yourself differently at the conscious level, while the subconscious identity program continues operating from the original configuration, producing the behaviors, interpretations, emotional responses, and perceptual filters of the old identity rather than the new one. This is the specific mechanism behind the common experience of making a genuine conscious commitment to change, successfully maintaining the changed behavior for a period, and then watching the old behavior reassert itself as if the commitment had never been made. The conscious commitment revised the self-image. The subconscious identity program remained unchanged and eventually reasserted its dominant influence. The subconscious identity program was formed through the specific experiences and interpretations of early life that produced the deepest conclusions about what kind of person this particular individual is. Not what kind of person they want to be, not what kind of person they would ideally be, but what kind of person the actual evidence of their actual experience has revealed them to be. These conclusions are drawn from genuinely limited and genuinely selective evidence, evaluated by a mind that was too young and too inexperienced to evaluate it accurately. And yet the conclusions have the specific felt quality of obvious fact rather than of interpretation, which is what makes them so stable and so resistant to the simple intellectual arguments that the conscious mind attempts to use against them. You cannot argue a person out of a position they did not arrive at through argument. Revising the subconscious identity program requires providing the subconscious with genuine, lived evidence that contradicts the old identity at the experiential level rather than only at the intellectual one. This is why the practice of acting from the new identity before it has fully arrived, described in the previous audiobook of this series, is so specifically important in this context. Every instance of genuine action taken from the new identity Every moment of genuine behavior consistent with the person the new identity describes adds to the subconscious's experiential record in exactly the way the original identity was built, through real, lived, emotionally meaningful experience. The subconscious updates identity programming from the lived record far more readily than from the conceptual argument, which is why genuine behavioral change in the direction of the new identity, even in small, specific, ordinary situations, is the most practically effective tool for identity revision available. The specific language of identity revision is worth examining in concrete terms. The old identity expresses itself in statements that begin with "I am not," "I cannot," "I never," or "I am someone who," followed by a limiting characteristic that has been treated as a permanent feature rather than a current pattern. The new identity is not simply the opposite declaration, which the subconscious will immediately reject as implausible given the accumulated evidence of the old pattern. It is the specific identity of the person who is genuinely in the process of becoming something different, which is both honest about current reality and genuinely generative toward the new direction. I am becoming someone who navigates financial decisions with increasing skill and confidence. I am someone who is learning to receive genuine care and genuine connection with increasing ease. These statements describe a genuine direction of movement rather than a destination not yet reached, and the subconscious finds them considerably more acceptable than absolute claims that contradict its entire accumulated evidence base. The quality of the imagination used to inhabit the new identity matters as much as the language used to express it, because the subconscious responds to vivid, imagined experience with neurological processes substantially similar to those it uses to process genuine, lived experience, spending genuine, deliberate time each day inhabiting the specific felt experience of the new identity, seeing through the eyes of the person you are becoming, feeling what that person feels in the body, noticing what they notice in their environment, and responding to situations with the responses that person would generate, is not self-deception. It is genuine neural rehearsal of the identity you are building, providing the subconscious with the experiential record of the new identity that makes its consolidation progressively more natural rather than continuously effortful. The community you surround yourself with is an often underestimated but powerfully consequential factor in identity revision, because the identities reflected back to us by the people closest to us become part of the evidence base from which the subconscious constructs and maintains its own sense of who we are. The people who have known you as the old identity, who respond to you from a long history of interaction with the person you used to be, and who may be unconsciously invested in your continued occupation of that familiar role, provide a social mirror that reflects the old identity rather than the new one. This is not a reason to abruptly abandon existing relationships, but it is a genuine reason to deliberately cultivate connections with people who see and reflect back the new identity you are building, who treat you as the person you are becoming rather than as the person you have been, and who provide the social confirmation that the subconscious uses as evidence in its ongoing assessment of who you genuinely are. The identity shift that changes everything is not the dramatic, instantaneous transformation of a single cathartic moment. However appealing that kind of transformation might be to the part of you that is tired of the gradual, patient work of genuine inner revision. It is the accumulation of genuine, consistent, specific, small shifts across the daily dimensions of thought, language, felt state, behavioral choice, and social environment. Each one alone, modest and unremarkable, together constituting a genuine, durable revision of the deepest programming layer that determines what the inner world produces, and therefore what the outer world reflects. When this revision reaches genuine critical mass, which requires the patient consistency that genuine inner work always requires, the experience is not of having worked hard to become different. It is of recognizing, with a kind of quiet astonishment, that the person looking back from the mirror is simply, naturally, comfortably, someone for whom the life that was previously wanted has become the life that is simply, naturally, being lived. Chapter 11. When the universe sends you a test. Among the most reliable patterns in the experience of anyone doing genuine inner work is the appearance of a specific kind of challenge that arrives right at the threshold of genuine breakthrough. A challenge that appears designed by its timing alone to test whether the inner shift has genuinely consolidated, or whether it is still fragile enough to be undone by the application of sufficient external pressure. The challenge might appear as the relationship that becomes most difficult, right when genuine openness and genuine vulnerability have been most recently cultivated. It might appear as the financial setback that arrives right when genuine abundance consciousness has begun to feel like something more than wishful thinking. It might appear as the professional obstacle that materializes right at the moment when genuine confidence has begun to replace the chronic self-doubt that preceded the inner work. These are not punishments from a vindictive universe. They are the specific tests through which genuine consolidation is distinguished from surface-level change. Understanding why this pattern of threshold challenge exists makes it considerably more navigable than it appears to someone experiencing it for the first time, without any framework for understanding its significance. The outer world does not instantaneously reorganize to reflect inner changes because the outer world has its own temporal dynamics, its own momentum of established pattern, and its own collection of people and circumstances that have been relating to the inner world's previous configuration and that have not yet adjusted to its changed version. The old pattern, in its external expressions, continues producing its characteristic challenges for some period after the inner change that will eventually end. Those challenges has genuinely occurred. The person who has genuinely shifted internally encounters these continued external expressions of the old pattern, not as evidence that the shift did not work, but as the still existing outer residue of an inner pattern that is in the process of ending. The specific inner response to the threshold test determines whether it functions as a genuine setback or as the final consolidation of a shift that was already genuinely in progress. The inner response of returning to the old patterns, of reactivating the old signal, of abandoning the new orientation in the face of renewed external pressure, reinstates the old inner configuration and interrupts the process of outer transformation that was already underway. The inner response of maintaining the new orientation, of meeting the challenge from the position of the new inner self rather than the old one, while acknowledging the genuine difficulty of the challenge, rather than pretending it is not difficult, demonstrates the genuine consolidation of the inner shift and allows the outer world's continued reorganization to proceed, rather than being halted by the regression of the inner world to its previous configuration. Maintaining the new inner orientation through a genuine threshold test is one of the most specifically challenging things anyone attempting genuine inner transformation will encounter, because the threshold test arrives precisely when the new orientation is most recently established and therefore least automatically accessible. The old patterns are deeply grooved through years or decades of use. The new orientation is freshly carved and requires conscious activation rather than the automatic availability of the old pattern. Under pressure, the path of neurological least resistance is the old groove, not the new one. The choice to take the new path in the moment of the test is therefore a genuinely effortful choice rather than a natural one, which is exactly why it functions as a genuine test rather than as simply another ordinary moment of practice. The specific tools for navigating threshold tests are not different in kind from the tools described throughout this audiobook. They are simply the same tools applied under the specific conditions of heightened pressure and heightened temptation to revert. The breath practice that shifts the nervous system from sympathetic activation toward parasympathetic regulation is available in the specific moment of the threshold challenge, providing the physiological regulation from which the new inner orientation becomes genuinely accessible rather than merely theoretically desirable. The deliberate return to the felt sense of the desired state, even briefly during the challenge, provides the emotional anchor that prevents complete drift back to the old signal. The conscious use of the new identity language, even internally and silently, in the moment of challenge, reinforces the new identity program at exactly the moment the old one is most powerfully reasserting itself. Compassion for yourself during threshold tests, the same quality of genuine self-compassion recommended throughout this audiobook for navigating all dimensions of genuine inner work, is specifically important here, because threshold tests are precisely the moments when the inner critic is most likely to use a regression toward old patterns as confirmation of every limiting belief about your fundamental capacity for genuine change. The regression, if it occurs, is not confirmation of inadequacy. It is the entirely predictable result of encountering maximum pressure with a relatively newly established new pattern that has not yet reached the neurological depth and automaticity of the old one. Treating the regression with the same compassionate, patient understanding recommended for every other aspect of this work, and simply returning to the new orientation as soon as that return is genuinely possible, is the specific inner response that allows genuine learning from the test rather than collapse in the face of it. The person who passes a genuine threshold test, who maintains the new inner orientation through the specific challenge that arrives right at the threshold of genuine breakthrough, typically experiences something on the other side that is qualitatively different from the ordinary daily progress of genuine inner work. There is a specific quality of confidence that is only available on the other side of a genuine test, a deep knowing born from lived experience rather than from intellectual understanding or wishful optimism. This confidence is not arrogance, and it is not the brittle bravado of someone performing certainty they do not feel. It is the specific settled assurance of someone who has genuinely discovered through direct experience that their new inner orientation is robust enough to maintain itself under genuine pressure. This discovery changes something about the relationship with the work going forward, making the continued practice feel less like effort against resistance and more like the natural expression of who you have genuinely become. The universe tests not to punish, but to reveal. And what gets revealed by how a threshold test is navigated is the genuine depth of the inner shift rather than simply its surface-level expression. Passing a genuine test demonstrates consolidation. Temporarily failing and then returning demonstrates resilience. Both are progress in the genuine sense of the word, because both represent genuine engagement with the specific challenge of the test, rather than avoidance of the entire category of experience the test represents. The only failure that ends the journey is the interpretation of any test as evidence that the journey was never genuinely possible, which converts what was always a temporary setback in the trajectory of genuine transformation into a permanent conclusion that the transformation itself is simply not available. Chapter 12. The universe has always been ready. And so have you. Nothing in this audiobook has been suggesting that the universe needs to be convinced to provide what you desire. Nothing here has been proposing that external abundance, genuine love, creative fulfillment, and meaningful contribution are scarce resources that the universe distributes reluctantly to those who manage to send exactly the right signal in exactly the right way. The universe is not withholding. It has never been withholding. The abundance, the love, the opportunity, the creative expression that you have been wanting is not somewhere else waiting to be earned or deserved or attracted from a long distance. It has been here all along, in the only place anything genuinely is, in the immediate present moment, available to the degree that the inner world is open and receptive to receiving it. The entire journey of this audiobook has been the journey of becoming genuinely open to what was always available, rather than the journey of convincing some external power to provide something it was previously unwilling to offer. This shift in understanding from a model of the universe as a power that grants or withholds to a model of the universe as a responsive field that returns what the inner world genuinely radiates changes the entire emotional quality of the work described throughout these chapters. It removes the anxious, pleading quality that characterizes so much of what passes for manifestation practice, the specific quality of trying to get the universe to cooperate rather than learning to genuinely align with what the universe is continuously, faithfully providing, in correspondence with whatever inner signal it receives. The work is not the work of making the universe comply. It is the work of becoming genuinely aligned with the abundance that is already the universe's fundamental nature, which requires only the specific inner shifts described across every chapter of this audiobook. The clearing of limiting beliefs, the revision of the subconscious blueprint, the cultivation of genuine high-frequency states, the release of desperate wanting, and the steady, patient practice of inhabiting the felt experience of what is genuinely desired. You are not behind. This specific reassurance is offered here at the close of this audiobook because one of the most consistent emotional experiences of people engaged in genuine inner transformation work is a particular kind of grief about time. The specific feeling that so many years were spent not knowing these principles, living from the old patterns, generating the old signal, producing the old results, and that this time was somehow lost in a way that cannot be recovered. This is a genuinely understandable response to genuine understanding about how things actually work. But it is not accurate. The path that brought you to this exact moment of this exact understanding was the path that was required to produce the specific person capable of receiving and genuinely using what this understanding contains. The timing is not accidental. It is not late. It is the exact timing produced by the exact sequence of experience required to produce the exact readiness you are bringing to this work. The practical invitation at the close of this audiobook is the same simple but genuinely profound invitation that has been running underneath every chapter: to begin. Not to begin after the next obstacle is navigated, the next relationship is stabilized, or the next financial pressure is resolved. Not to begin when the inner work feels less daunting, when circumstances provide more external reinforcement, or when you feel more genuinely ready. To begin from exactly where you are, with exactly what you have, with whatever combination of genuine desire, genuine uncertainty, and genuine openness to transformation this moment genuinely contains. Because the beginning that happens in the next actual moment of your actual life, however small and however tentative, is a genuinely different thing from the beginning that is continuously deferred toward a future moment of greater readiness that tends never quite to arrive. The specific practices most worth prioritizing in the immediate aftermath of completing this audiobook are the ones that address your particular version of the core patterns this audiobook has described. Somewhere in the 12 chapters, something landed with a quality of recognition that felt more personal than informational, more like seeing something genuinely true about your specific situation than like encountering an interesting idea about human nature in the abstract. Those points of specific recognition are the diagnostic signals pointing toward the specific inner work most consequential for your particular life and your particular journey. Trust those signals enough to begin the work they point toward, rather than moving on to the next piece of information before the current understanding has had time to settle into genuine practice. The universe has always been ready to respond to whatever signal the inner world sends, with the faithful, non-judgmental, abundant responsiveness that is simply how a coherent system operates. The question was never whether the universe would comply. The question was always whether the inner world was generating the signal that corresponded to what was genuinely wanted, or the signal that corresponded to the chronic fears, the deeply encoded insufficiency, and the specific waiting quality of someone for whom genuine abundance always seems to belong to someone else, or to some better future time. The inner work described throughout this audiobook is the work of shifting from the second signal to the first, and that work is available to anyone who approaches it with the genuine honesty, genuine patience, and genuine compassion for themselves that every dimension of it requires. What comes next is yours to determine. With the understanding this audiobook has provided, and with the genuine inner resources that the work of genuine inner transformation, consistently and compassionately engaged, will continue revealing and developing across the months and years ahead. The universe is responsive. The inner world is revisable. The life genuinely desired is available to the person whose inner world is genuinely aligned with receiving it. And the alignment, never complete and never permanent, but always available for the next genuine step of genuine engagement, begins exactly here, exactly now, with whatever genuine intention this moment genuinely contains. When nothing works, this is what to do. Stop working at the level of the symptom and start working at the level of the source. The source is the inner world. The source is the subconscious blueprint. The source is the signal that the total configuration of your inner life has been broadcasting into a universe that has been faithfully, non-judgmentally, and abundantly responding to exactly that signal for as long as it has been sent. Change the signal genuinely, and the response genuinely changes. This is not a promise made lightly. It is the consistent testimony of everyone who has done this work with genuine depth, genuine consistency, and genuine compassion for themselves through the inevitable challenges and the inevitable rewards of the most important journey any human being ever undertakes. The journey into genuine knowledge of and genuine sovereignty over the inner world, from which the outer world is continuously, faithfully, and always accurately made.